You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadow Dark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss our ongoing monthly Sunday sessions. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name's Jody. With me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague who is deep in the midst of one hell of a GMing bender. Matt, how are you? You hanging in? You hydrated? You all right?
Jody, you got to get through this episode quick. I got one more session to prep for.
Holy cow. 4 sessions in 4 days. It's a marathon. The man is legend. All right. Today's episode, though, we're going to focus on our monthly open table Sunday sessions that need a better name group thing. Matt, take us to the table. Tell us about what's been going on.
All right, Jody. So the first thing I'll do is I'll talk about my huge weekend.
Huge.
Friday night, ran a 4-hour session for you and the Dolmenwood group. It's a banger of a session. It was awesome. The following day, on Saturday, I ran a 5-hour session for the Sunday once a month that we're expanding to one Saturday a month as well to try and get people who couldn't make it on Sundays. Open table group. That one needs a better name for sure.
Yeah, the Saturday formerly on Sunday, now occurring with nope.
Well, in addition to, so then I don't know how I did this, but I sent out the email invite to the group for the Saturday right before our currently or previously scheduled Sunday session that I GM'd yesterday for 6 hours. So it was a nice ramp up, 4, 5, 6 hours, but it was 15 total hours of GMing, 15 total hours of hard and fast Shadow Dark action for me. But Jody, you had a big day yesterday. You played for upwards of 6 hours. I mean, the final combat of the session that we will get to lasted longer than you expected. This all culminates in this conversation. I think this is such a great time. This is happening at the time of recording yesterday. This is going to go out later today. So this is a quick turnaround. We haven't done one of these really before. We're usually a little bit ahead of the recording schedule.
Holidays.
But the holidays got in the way, and also we thought, shoot, this is kind of a cool idea. Let's just have the conversation, do a bit of editing, and throw it on the internet. And the conversation is going to be about not just what happened this weekend, but the fact that we've been doing this once-a-month gaming for over a year now. Our highest character level, I believe, is 6 or 7. I think 7 as of Saturday. We have brought together a lot of like-minded gamers from our county in Santa Cruz County here in California. Just a ton of people who otherwise wouldn't have sat at the same table, and I think that's something you and I are really proud of. So we're going to talk about our weekend of gaming, but we're also going to talk about where this bigger kind of project of these once-a-month gaming sessions stands.
All right. So let's gather around the fire here, talk about our respective sessions and what went down. I don't know if you want to get into your whole weekend of sessions.
That's a little too much even for this show.
Okay. And do you have a session tonight? Is it still on?
Yes, we're going to record this session. I'm gonna do a little bit more work, and then I'm gonna edit it, and then I'm gonna run a 2-hour 5e game.
Yeah, the irony is I had my Saturday. I was supposed to GM another session. So between us, in the course of 4 days, we were supposed to have run/played 7 sessions. We dropped down to 6 because my wife got very sick.
Jody, I mean, that was a tragedy, but also one of us needs to retain some amount of sanity from all. I have the whole day today. All I could think about was this show and finally getting out of my head all these things.
So I shouldn't have spent all day Saturday background prepping for a different campaign that I want to run and painting miniatures for other things.
We can't get away from the hobby. The hobby's too great. All right.
But take us to the table. Let us gather around the fire here. I mean,
yeah, let's do it, man.
let's do something and talk about this and get it out. Tell us about your game.
All right. So I'm going to do a quick overview here. So Friday was awesome. We had a huge diversity of encounters and different types of stuff. It's not technically a part of our Sunday once a month game situation, but I kind of want to mention it because it kind of speaks to something that I think we're going to maybe get into later.
And this is the Dolmenwood game.
This is our Dolmenwood game. You play in it, and we have 5 other players in this ongoing Dolmenwood game. Banger session, exploration, combat, lore delivery,
roleplay,
tons of roleplay. I mean, the last couple sessions of our Dolmenwood game, I think, have been as close to the platonic ideal of what I see as a great role-playing game session. You can see my Freudian slip there. They're a little bit, they're catering to the role-play a little bit, which I think both of us really enjoy. But that's an ongoing campaign. And what occurred on Saturday was, it's the inaugural Saturday session that we're going to start adding to the mix. And the players delved into the Barrow Maze specifically to liberate and basically do a jailbreak of one of the characters who had been lost in the dark due to an escape the dungeon roll 2 months ago in our October session. So this is a reasonably high level, I think at the time, 5th level wizard who got lost in the dark and who just couldn't play until that character was liberated. And so they made the decision to go down into the Barrow Maze. They knew kind of the general area, but they hadn't really explored it. There had been some things that happened in that previous session that allowed them to kind of get a gist of where they needed to go. But they get down there and they start exploring. And eventually, after a protracted fight, we did a skill challenge because we were kind of running out of time to kind of move the clock forward. We used some heist mechanics from Blades in the Dark, that kind of flashback. I think a couple players kind of used that flashback mechanic of, hey, would I have known about this corridor? Could I have thrown caltrops here previously? Roll for it, etc. So we just kind of created this jailbreak heist at the end of the session, and it was successful. And so Snib, this wizard, a fan favorite wizard now at the table, played by one of our most beloved members of our wonderful gaming community here in Santa Cruz, is back in the mix. And
for good or ill with Snib. Who could tell?
Yeah. But that was a cool session because it was specifically oriented around saving a previously lost character, which we've only ever had happen one other time, and that was actually pretty recently. Mm-hmm. The Sunday session that I ran was a fully generative random dungeon. There are these Barrow Maze or Barrow Mounds in Barrow Maze that basically have descriptions of what the dungeon is like, but then nothing in them.
Oh.
Or they don't, sorry, not nothing in them, but they have no dungeon map.
Right.
So I just generated on Donjon, the kind of random generator. I just generated a random dungeon and used the Shadow Dark book when necessary, figuring out kind of a theme for the dungeon. I'd had this dungeon theme in my head before, and we ran a basically completely random, generative, improv dungeon on Sunday. And I'll get to some of the problems with that, but I want to kind of take a step back and ask you what happened in your game, because I think these 3 sessions are just super fascinating, and they're also emblematic of just, I don't know, the kinds of things that this style of play allows for, but also some of the kind of drawbacks.
The limits, yeah. So yeah, it was a banger session. The group who I had coming back were all, for the last about 3-4 months, I've been running Caves of Chaos from Keep on the Borderlands, and this group had all made multiple forays into the caves. So they had tons of rumors about the layout of the valley. They knew all kinds of stuff. I've also kind of made the artificial decree, but I think a good one, of saying this dungeon isn't appropriate for really 5th and above level players. characters that if a group of 5th level and beyond folks start showing up, and we have quite a few 5th level and 6th level characters out in the mix, just wouldn't be challenging for them without me massively overhaul and retailoring the dungeon to meet them, which isn't something you or I are doing on these Sunday sessions. It's kind of, we have a bespoke dungeon and get into it. So these guys were all 3rd, 4th level. So they were at the point, and they knew that there's a chaotic evil cave up at the back, and the other critters in the area stay away from it. They want nothing to do with it. For those of you who are keeping the Borderlands curious, one, I think the statute of limitations on spoilers has kind of run out on this one. But I will also try and be somewhat mindful. So they elected to go hit up the big bad cave. They knew this is the spot, if this is as bad as it gets around here. They had some great encounters with roaming random monster guards from our crawling clock ticking down early on. Some really cool, souped up, tricked out, it's a zombie, but is it a zombie? Because it's got some extra stuff. A trapped encounter room. They went down, and I got to, I'm going to pause at this one. One of my favorite GMing, I don't know if it's a trope, but just things to happen is when you set a room. And my two kind of focus points coming into this Sunday were, I really wanted to be focused on my description, like using the sensory description and keep coming back to like rebuild the environment. It's easy when somebody first walks into a dungeon to go, there's walls and stones and this and that. And then you don't ever mention them again. And I was like, no, this one's really cool. And I want to really play that up. Ended up playing a lot with audio, but I can talk about that more later. But then they got to a room where there was a treasure, and you walk in, and this is the description of the room, and here's all the details and cool and creepy and evil temple-y stuff, and there's a treasure right in front of you. Go ahead. It's just sitting right there. You can just grab it. And they backed out. They walked away. They said, no, we're good. We're okay. We'll just leave that there. I just love that. That is like, I've done something right when that happens. But what you came in, because Matt, you guys wrapped and came in, and this last combat just kept going and going. They had an encounter with some cultists, and I was using the Shadow Dark straight up cultists, and they had made some significant amounts of noise. They had made their presence known as a fireball wand is wont to do.
In that way.
In that way.
Got it.
And they ended up in this protracted fight in the big bad final chamber, and man, what a fight it was. It was attacked from all sides and strange environmental effects that they dealt with. And there is just a ton going on. Lost a beloved character. One of our pour one out for Elderberry, our halfling thief, was an excellent thief. They had to scoop up the stable but unconscious body of their
wizard, right?
Yeah, their halfling wizard. And so the session ended with their elven priest and their human fighter just running. Like, we got some stuff and we're going to get out of here. And the elven priest fell behind in the dark. We used this escape the dungeon mechanic. And I kind of was telling them, hey, folks, we're running out of time. You guys, we have to, like, we got to close this off. We're past our 6 o'clock cutoff time. And that's one of the things you and I have of these sessions, because it's, anybody can show up. They don't need a ton of experience.
Right.
Any level character is welcome. Let's just get together and play. We also set pretty rigid timelines. We start at noon and we wrap at 6. And they were in this combat. And I was like, y'all, we got to call it. I don't want to unjustly do it. So we ran a little bit long, but man, it was a spicy ending that ended up with the human fighter carrying the halfling wizard on out into the light, and one unconscious, one awake, and come back another day and explore the depths of this cavern, because they didn't see it all. But
you got to save you got to save the elven priest.
Oh yeah, well, the elven priest had grabbed a couple choice items off of the fallen thief who had fallen next to him. Also want to call out, this was one of those great player moments. When you let the dice decide, right? The joy of, I think one of the strengths of these Sunday sessions has been letting the dice for the players tell a story. You and I both don't use GM screens. We roll in the open.
Indeed.
And this priest had never failed a casting check that I was aware of, ever. Or, a healing check for a healing spell. And unfortunately, Elderberry, it was the first time ever in this dark temple. And I could see the player was affected. They were out of luck tokens, and the dice decided. But it made for this very poignant moment that of none of the players wanting to leave him. And I thought a TPK was on the table, I'm not going to lie. But you'd mentioned that you thought the same thing in your session, that you thought a TPK was imminent with the random generated dungeon. So I'm actually curious to hear more at that. I didn't realize you had told me afterwards real briefly that you were random generating things, and the dice created some insane things, but I didn't realize that the whole dungeon was that sort of way. So I'm actually, I think it's interesting to hear about the random a little bit more. So whereas my dungeon was very bespoke. There was very little random treasure rolls. There were very few random encounter rolls. It was the encounter lists were very scripted of this is what will show up. This is the effect it will have. Everything was pretty pre-generated as opposed to yours. I'm going to prompt you to just jump in at the guess who showed up not once. Like that was insane. That's one of your, if you have your GMing Shadow Dark bingo card, this is a box. It's like, I think the center box.
Definitely, Jody, truly a box to check. So if you pop out your Shadow Dark rulebook and you go to page 183 under the D100 table for Tomb random encounters. Now, Jody, we've talked about random encounters. I just want to kind of cut in here right before, so everyone's finding their pages right now. And I just want to say that we've talked on the pod previously that random encounters from the Shadow Dark book are oftentimes a little easier to use if you roll them prior to the session, because it actually, you need some time to kind of really chew on them a little bit, because they can be pretty meaty, and they can also throw a wrench into an otherwise kind of narratively cohesive situation or a dungeon with an ecology. They can really throw a wrench in. Well, I was using these at the table when I didn't know what needed to happen when the crawling die reached 0. And there were a couple that I had to interpret because they wouldn't have made sense. But they did exactly what they were supposed to. They just created a wonderful image in my head, and I just ran with that, right? And that's the beauty of a random table. Well, if we're all on page 183, the party had just walked into what I had described as a central room containing 8 coffins. We had previously established via a D6 yes or no roll. Somebody had mentioned at the table that the level 1 priest, whose background was a jeweler, there was some jewelry or something in the adventure. I can't remember exactly what the moment that prompted this was, probably because of the moment I'm about ready to talk about in just a second, Jody. We'll get there. I promise. You're on the edge of your seat. I can see it. We previously established that this was that character's family's tomb. And this tomb is very old. So he had stumbled into his family's tomb amongst all these other barrow mounds near the barrow maze. And this central chamber was like the burial chamber for a lot of his relatives, his like ancestors. So there's 8 of these sarcophagi coffins, stone coffers. I rolled a 97 on the Tomb D100 encounter table, which reads, "The wandering merchant pops, gasping, out of a coffin."
What? Okay, wandering merchant sighting has occurred.
I rolled D6. How far away is this? Near. Across the room, the wandering merchant shows up. There's then the opportunity to roll a check for a reaction roll, right? And I decided to roll it against the charisma of the priest character, who I believe had either a -1 or a +0. Rolled it, 2 6s. I was like, I'm not even going to adjust this. I mean, 2 6. I mean, that's
boxcars. It's got to
stand. It's got to ride. So roll a 97. Roll boxcars. Pops out and has this role-playing encounter right here in the chamber where the players have to offer and make an offering to the wandering merchant. The wandering merchant does not care about money, Jody, as far as I can tell from the stat block and from my own headcanon. The wandering merchant doesn't care about money. Literally like a demigod, right?
Yeah.
And a multi-planar demigod.
Right.
And shows up and asks them to tell him a story, a compelling story about an item. They offer him some like jeweled stuff. One of the players offered him a rope, but told this amazing story about how this rope had saved his life and the lives of many people. Just amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
Just so happens that this was Snib.
Oh my.
I roll a reaction roll. Snib had like a -2. I rolled like an 11. And so exchanges this rope for a like 3rd level tier 3 scroll. Another one. They all got these great reaction rolls, which was the way that I was adjudicating it. Fast forward, Jody, to them attempting to fuss with these coffins, these sarcophagi that were trapped, and they were doing some fancy stuff and whatever. The crawling die ticks down again to 0. And then I rolled because I thought, surely we'll go to another table. We'll go to the ruins table, D100 ruins table. Boom, roll the dice, D100, 96. A Minotaur guides the wandering merchant on a path. We had established in the rumor at the beginning of the session, Jody, that this dungeon was infested with ratmen and rats, but they had been overtaken. I'm not kidding. Overtaken by a Minotaur that had been using the rats to go out and pilfer treasure and bring it back as rats do. I rolled this and I literally couldn't. So the Minotaur.
You're like, not the Wandering Merchant again. Oh, yes, the Wandering Merchant again.
Through a set of double doors the characters had not been through yet, strolls the merchant strolls the Minotaur guiding the Wandering Merchant. The Minotaur sees the characters trying to plunder these tombs and, doing so kind of poorly. But regardless, immediately gets pissed and charges. I rolled a reaction roll there, like rolled a 3.
Appropriate.
And the Wandering Merchant just was, first of all, confused because it had been hundreds of years, presumably, since he had been in this room. He had been traveling interdimensionally and probably time traveling. And,
you guys are still here. What?
What are you guys still doing here? And just peaced out. Totally peaced out. I was like, well, looks bad. See ya. And the Minotaur charged, and we had this crazy combat. So,
man, maximum serendipity. Holy cow.
Maximum serendipity. One of those led to a role-playing encounter that got the characters some amazing stuff, and the other one got them a fight with a really gnarly. I used the stats, the additional kind of stats for the Scarlet Minotaur in the GM book. I think they're basically the same as the Minotaur, and I was kind of using them interchangeably and playing fast and loose. See previous statements. So I don't want to go on for too long, but that was the situation. And I don't have a whole lot to say other than I enjoy improvisational GMing. I enjoy generative GMing. This session was a bit out of my comfort zone, and I don't want to play this way all the time. Mm-hmm. It was a fun novelty. I enjoy doing it in small little sections. I don't want to run a randomized dungeon every single session. I don't even want to run a mostly randomized dungeon every single session. I like my random to be a curated random where we're kind of playing within, we're playing in a sandbox rather than having the entire park to play in, if the metaphor makes any sense.
I think so. I think it does for me, but I'm also living it. So we'll see from our listeners what they say. So I want to MC here for a moment, and let's pull the lens back and talk at a little bit more of a kind of macro level about these open table groups. So again, anybody can play, doesn't matter what level character, as long as you're a chill and reasonably pleasant person to be around and you're into doing some fantasy role play at the table, we're good.
Right.
Outside of that, though, there are some other norms that you and I have ascribed to for these Sunday sessions. They are dungeon runs. You are go to the location, get the loot, get out. What would you say are some of the other strengths of this style of play? So it's welcome to almost anybody. It is a prescribed space. Both of us are using modules to various degrees. Yeah. What else is a benefit? What else do you point to when you think of these Sunday sessions and you go, okay, that's cool. What else is a benefit to running this way?
So aside from the bringing, like the kind of big picture stuff, like bringing together people and creating a community, which has been great, I think one thing I want to kind of pat ourselves on the back, I think we've done a good job of, and the other is more of just like this style of play's benefit. The first thing is, and this one's quick, is just I think we've created a pretty good tool set for, and a pretty good kind of framework and skeleton. For instance, we have these party roles, right? So it's the mapper, the experience accountant or treasure accountant, the caller, the light keeper, and the monster tracker. Mapper draws a map, experience accountant tracks treasure, and we have some additional ways to gain experience through exploration. Caller is the person we look to when the table's faffing about. The light keeper monitors the light timers and hands out the little candles that we have to show who is holding the light. And the monster tracker helps the GM track HP of monsters counting up using these little red D10s and D100s. Well, what we did is we gamified this, and we said if you do all of them, you get a free luck token.
Yep.
And the reason you get a free luck token is, I think the other thing that we've done, which we've created these very prescribed pre and post game steps. And inside of the pregame steps, there is a pay for accommodations. You pay 25 gold. You just don't take an exhaustion, or in our parlance, you don't lose a slot, right?
Right.
You take an exhaustion. If you pay 50 gold, you get a luck token. You fancy accommodations, you get a luck token. So we've created like mechanics for ensuring that a lot of the questions that might be asked at another open table about how things function are contained within a zine, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about at some point on the show, our crazy zine habit that is now proliferating. But
we'll link our current Sunday booklet. You'll be able to get a look at it.
We'll link what we can. There's a lot of stuff in here that we've cribbed from other sources, and I just want to be careful about posting this stuff. So when we post stuff like this, we'll usually post it as a non-downloadable Drive doc. Yeah, because that's the way to share things without kind of copyright infringing, as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the internet is concerned. But the thing that I think about the sessions that is great is they are Diablo-like sessions, right?
Yeah.
So you're going in, you're getting loot, you're leveling up, you're becoming more powerful, and that's just fun. It's fun to see your character grow. It's fun to explore spaces, to solve puzzles, and to solve challenges.
Yeah, I totally agree. The recounting of early 80s, like very early 80s Dungeons and Dragons, and you see the old modules, if you're into that sort of thing, it'll say with 10 to 12 characters. And I was always like, how in the heck do you have 10 to 12 characters? Well, now I get it. Like this, you run this style of a very procedural dungeon, and it actually works just fine. I think for me, one of the things I've really enjoyed about these Sunday sessions, again, outside of the top line takeaway of creating a space where people can access a role-playing game and not feel intimidated by it, hopefully, is that we've also had the opportunity to see a huge kind of wide brush stroke of the Shadow Dark rules and try out new twists and turns, which is a thing you and I love, of iterating on rules and homebrew and that sort of thing. But it's been really fun to watch all of the character classes work up through, 4, 5, 6 levels, to have a real understanding of Shadow Dark's internal magic item distribution power curve, to have a sense of player level ability and what's required of a good player, the human, not their perceived avatar, but them, what are skills they need. I think the other one is the power curve for PCs also, understanding what is that difference between a 5th level PC and a 2nd or 3rd level PC. What does that look like? How significant is that? I don't think that in a more kind of traditional narrative arc environment, I would have been able to see nearly as much of Shadow Dark as I have at this point. And I think it's worth noting, we are on to over a year of doing this every month, with anywhere on a really, really small month, maybe 4 or 5 players, up to, I think at one point you've had a dozen people here at our 2 tables. So we've seen a lot of play happen, and these are long sessions. They're 6-hour sessions, and we, usually eat up 5 hours of that is real-time play. So that for me is one of the strengths. Is I feel like I have kind of got to speed run Shadow Dark. It's a weird way to say it, but like
it makes sense.
I feel like I know the system.
Yeah. Well, and I want to ask you something. So I think both of us, just to preface this, both of us love this system. It is, from my perspective, a system that solved a lot of the problems that a lot of the problems I knew were issues in the other games that I was trying to run prior to Shadow Dark, and it also solved problems I didn't realize that I had. That said, I think because I've been yammering on, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of, in a protracted way, think through and kind of talk through some of the limiting factors of this particular style of game and style of I guess group or session. And then if there's any connections to Shadow Dark as a rule set where, we've made changes that maybe we shouldn't have. Because I have some thoughts on this, but I want to give you an opportunity to kind of kick this off, because you have a style of running that is kind of that gritty realism that I think is more in line with the ethos of Shadow Dark. It's certainly at lower levels. So as far as you're concerned, where are the friction points, right? Where are you feeling like maybe there's room for us to improve the way that this works, change some of the ways that we're doing things, or where is it just not fulfilling for you as a GM?
Oof, there's a lot of ways to respond to that. Wow, that was a very good open-ended question that has my my hamster is running as fast as he can on his little hamster wheel up there. There's smoke coming out my ears. Stylistically, let me address that one first. Yeah, I run in, I think the way I said it to you that you said was most helpful was think Wild West. That Wild West framework, that gritty realism, that grim, dark fantasy. If you label all those on it, you get an idea of what I'm going for. Survival, exploration. So for me, mechanically, Shadow Dark scratches a lot of those itches. The addition of our exhaustion mechanic has been huge. It's a huge, huge benefit. I realized in the heat of excitement in the session I was just talking about, that very scary end of combat where I thought TPK was, I missed an exhaustion that would have mattered. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It was to the benefit of the players on an already very difficult ending to a session. Stylistically, there is, or rules-wise, the rules of Shadow Dark, where do I feel friction? And the one point where I do notice it is there is a whimsy in Shadow Dark. There is a kind of fun element of a little bit of silliness and lightheartedness that is important, right? You got to have the light with the dark. Otherwise, it's all just bad and grim, and nobody wants to, play a Baroque style fantasy game, I don't think, for hours and hours and hours on end. Sometimes that will come through in a way that catches me off guard, and I find it difficult to force it in. Had I had your roles of the Wandering Merchant shows up twice, that would have been way outside of my comfort zone for ruling. I'm immediately thrilled about it because I knew you took it. And I went, wow, that really plays to Matt's strengths. It had to have been an awesome moment. At the same time, for me, if I was running, I would have felt totally hamstrung by that. It would have felt arbitrary and silly, and I just wouldn't have handled it very well, I don't think. And the rules sometimes create those situations. One of our players quite some time ago found a cockatrice egg.
Yeah.
And it ended up, you resolved it. And that was on a random roll.
Yeah.
And that is a level of fantasy of item that just I don't go to. So at times when things, those arcane objects, the really powerful, wonderful things that are in Shadow Dark show up, they're outside of that kind of mechanical purview, and it can be difficult to make rulings about those sorts of things or to make judgment calls on the fly without it feeling punitive or kind of power fantasy wish fulfilling. Like the math is so tight in Shadow Dark that if something is portrayed to be extremely exciting and magical, it's tough not to make it game breaking immediately, because a +3 on something is is insanely powerful and will have massive effect, or upping the damage dice on something will have a huge effect. And there are small elements where those things show up, or certainly in older modules or other third-party modules, you just see those things. And it can be difficult for me, and this headcanon I have, to kind of resolve those things. Yeah. And that gets to the second half of what you asked, which was like just me and my style of running and the vibe. And I think this is pretty similar for both of us. So when you run a grim, dark survival fantasy, the juice, hopefully for your players, is the sense of accomplishment, of overcoming struggle, that they have that like, no, I achieved. And this is player feedback I've gotten over the years of like, hey, I feel like when we win, air quotes on the win, because you can't win a role-playing game, but we've completed an objective. We reached a goal. Right. It feels really deeply earned.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is,
and I can attest to this, and I think we've talked about it on the show that I do worse as a player in that circumstance unless I know about it ahead of time. And so, but I think I know where you're getting to, but I just want to call out that I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, that success in your game feels earned in a way that, frankly, just to kind of be, to use myself as a foil, I don't think it feels the same in my game. But continue with that thought.
So to make those wins feel viable, to have that gritty struggle and get through, there has to be narrative stakes. And when you're only going into a dungeon, grabbing the loot and leaving, the meat of narrative stake that I can provide my players is pretty thin. It just, at some point, it's just about run in and bash and grab. And I am almost, I dare say at times, I feel almost unfairly expecting my players to play a certain way, which is like maximum slippery slope for a GM.
True.
That is giant red flashing lights, danger Will Robinson, caution tape, here there be dragons. Like, that is not the road you want to go down. If you as a GM start feeling like, I just wish my players were more like that should be a like, I need to do an audit.
That is a definite red flag.
That's a time for an audit.
Which is sort of what we're doing.
Which is sort of what we're doing, full transparency. But it's also a little bit of a byproduct of, but if all we're doing, as you mentioned, and I think the phrasing works, is Diablo style, go to the dungeon, grab the loot, come back, power up, rinse, repeat. It's difficult, especially in isolated dungeons. In the Caves of Chaos, it's really like there's an environment in the valley, but then each little cave is kind of its own little space. It's difficult to really make much of that other than just saying, hey, go get the loot. And there are times, and I've been able at various times to create varying degrees of buy-in to that sort of thing and make it, I think, rewarding and viable. But yeah, the juice for me as a GM, just stylistically, isn't about fulfilling a power fantasy. It's about watching people interact with a world and then seeing them be the heroes we all imagine from these stories. And that's both fun for me as a player. You know, this is that moment of like, I provide the experience I want. I think every GM does that.
For sure.
To some degree. So the experience I want is that I want to feel like the dirt on my hands when I'm a player. I want to feel the wind in my hair, and I want to have a sense of who my neighbors are. And then I go and do the heroic cool thing. And it's cool because I have the dirt on my hands and I know the town and I understand the stakes of what my character has accomplished. And that's really deeply rewarding for me. And this Sunday session thing we've been doing, as rewarding as it's been, and it's been super fun, and have loved, I think, every session I've run. I think we talked about the only session where I went, and it wasn't that I was super sad. I just was like, I wish it had been a little different.
Yeah.
That's about as bad as it's got, of like, I wish I could have given them a little bit more. But most of my, I wish that I could have given them more, I know the answer is in my default bag of tricks, and I'm not able to access my default bag of tricks stylistically. And I know, and this is where I'm going to kick it back to you, because I know as a player at your table for a long time now, and just as friend and colleague who talks about all this stuff all the time, stylistically, this hamstrings you. And I think you've tried to work around it, but your I can pull this lever whenever I need to up the energy, excitement, or joy at the table. it's limited. You have limited access to it with this dungeon crawling mode.
Yeah, so I want to echo everything you said because I agree with all of it. I will only add a couple of addendums, which is that Barrow Maze is, at least in my attempts to fix it, because I've talked about how much I like it, but I don't think I've really fully talked about how much fixing it needs. And we talked about this actually on the Dungeon Master Diaries Discord forum on the Shadowdark Discord page, but it needs a considerable amount of quote unquote fixing in order for it to work well, because it can be pretty repetitive and pretty redundant. And so I've used, that's where I've gotten the juice. But the thing that I wanted to kind of say as an addendum is that it is filled with like some pretty powerful magical items, combined with the fact that quote unquote fixing it requires some additional rolls, and there's just different treasure in a module that's not designed for Shadowdark, that's not taking into consideration the power curve of Shadowdark characters. So I've given out some loot that I regret, not because I don't think the players earned it or because it's cool or whatever, but because we've been learning the system, and I think now have we have a pretty good command of the system. But I will say, yesterday when I was randomly doing this dungeon, and I told one of our stalwart players this, I said, man, I really overtuned the treasure, because I was just offhandedly, when I would roll stuff up and rooms would kind of come up, I was just throwing gold piece values out and not realizing, oh no, like what am I doing? At the end of the session, they had way more gold than they probably quote unquote should have from the amount of rooms they explored, et cetera, et cetera. I don't regret it because the players are great. What I regret is that there's a misalignment between your table and my table. I think this is the thing that I really want in whatever we end up doing next, whether it's continuing something like this or doing something different. I want to use this as yet another opportunity to kind of try and see if we can't align our GMing, not the style necessarily, but kind of the kind of core central ethos of treasure, of pacing, of adjudicating of rules, that sort of thing. Yeah. Because for me, the challenge has definitely been a lack of narrative stakes. I threw out a whole bunch of hooks, or not a whole bunch of hooks, but I basically told the players on Saturday, like, here's what the adventure is about. And to the players' credit, they interacted with it, but nobody seems that particularly interested in like solving the puzzle or quote unquote winning the Barrow Maze, right?
Right.
And that's fine, but that also means that we're just going to be playing in Barrow Maze for an indefinite period of time. And I think my realization about that was I really also need narrative stakes. And I think that ultimately my narrative stakes that I like are factions. It is the interaction between the players choosing sides in conflict, right? I love when in our Dolmenwood game, you guys as players get caught between factions and have to make a decision about how you are going to interact with the world. Right now, in our Dolmenwood game, you are quasi-aligned with the church, which is very interesting because it has provided some extremely tense moments in the party while dealing with not just player characters, but NPCs as well. And that's the kind of layered texture that I like, on top of the danger and whatnot. So, we're going to continue talking about this, but I look forward to maybe on the show coming back and really maybe a couple of times, or I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think there's some fruitful discussion here, because I don't know how many GMs out there have the opportunity to run simultaneous sessions with another GM who they talk to a lot about this stuff in a way that is probably a little bit of like over intellectualizing sometimes, but in fact, like, you and I really care about providing a satisfying game for our players, and we do so in a different way. I want to see if I can get more of that earned feeling, and I think that there's an opportunity for me to do that, but I need some narrative stuff. I don't know what that is, but narrative stuff.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the term, but Jody, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. You need some people that you can do voices for. I mean, not to, it sounds like I'm trivializing, but I'm not. That's what's rad. As again, I have the joy of being a very regular player at your table. And when we meet new people, you have tried on a few occasions in our Dolmenwood game to present an NPC and be like, oh yeah, and this is the shopkeeper and he has the stuff you need. And the table won't let it slide anymore. No. And I know the game you're going to run tonight, they will not let that slide. No. Hey, Matt, do the voices.
Yeah.
And anymore, it's a thing you enjoy. When you say you like improv and like generative things, just quickly inhabiting these various characters is a strength of yours. And the faction play gives that a structure and guidance that's really enjoyable and gives me as a player, and I can watch my fellow players do it when you're running for us, go, oh, I know how to interact with this person. It's not just random person with funny voice. No, this person represents the church, and I don't like them because.
Right.
One of our players on Friday, that was the most assertive I've ever seen her, and she was like, hey, to an NPC, hey, take your hands off me, and I'm only going to tell you once. That player has never said anything that definitive to an NPC ever. And that wasn't even a combat situation. And it was like, yo, that was tense. That almost got crazy. And so when you say narrative stuff, the factions give that life. What's just a silly voice and a caricature now has stakes. And it's tough, I think, on a GM to use the old term. There's a pejorative called a Monty Hall dungeon of like you go in, you grab the loot, and there was too much loot, and the loot just was shooting out. The elusive shift used a term I'd never heard before that is questionable but fantastic, which was the gilded hole.
Yeah.
Which is just like, oh, that's taking the pejorative away and just going, oh, well, they go to the dungeon, get the loot, go home. Even though Barrow Maze has factions in it, if the core conceit of what we're doing on Sunday is go to the dungeon, get the loot, and go home, and that's what we've told our players, that's what we're doing. All the mechanics are set up that way. Yeah. We've even taken what's in Shadow Dark and embellished it in the XP system and some other changes we've made to even further emphasize that point of get the loot, get the gold, get home. That whole system undercuts this desire for both of us in different ways to want to tell a story.
100%.
While I don't get as caught up as a GM in faction play, I do like seeing the world evolve. And it can be very small. That's, I think, where my world evolve is maybe misleading to people. I don't need there to be socio-political change in our neighborhood. I think it's interesting that Bob the shopkeeper is no longer Bob the shopkeeper.
Now he's out of eggs.
He's out of eggs, and then he went out of business. And somehow the PCs were involved in that. And the little town they live in, or they're adventuring out of, subtle changes. These little shades of grays moving around. That is fulfilling to me. And even though it's not my strong suit to give silly voices to fun NPCs, it's also where I can hang my hat of why is this NPC this way. And we're both missing that. I mean, just to be really blunt about it, we're both missing it. The wonderfulness of the proceduralness of Shadow Dark as a dungeon crawl. I think there's a comedy to this of the internet discussion around, well, Shadow Dark's just for dungeon crawling.
Right.
And it does it very well. And both of us are like, no, after a year of playing, we love the system and we know it can do so much more narrative because our Dolmenwood game, we went multiple sessions prior to the last two. The comment was made, I can't remember the last time you rolled initiative.
Yeah.
Like, so there's no shortage of role play there. None.
No, and I think the other concern that I really want to just get out there is that if the core conceit of the game is to go into the dungeon to get treasure and cool items and come back, and we play for 6 hours, when a session goes poorly, so I don't think your session last night went poorly.
No.
But I think how it ended was not a sense of success.
Right.
And I worry that because those sessions are both necessary but also they are fundamentally less fun for players than the Monty Hall Gilded Hole dungeon, that I've run now 2 sessions in a row, Saturday and Sunday, where the players were successful. There were very tense moments. You mentioned the TPK. There were tense moments. I don't think the TPK was as close as potentially your table was anywhere near. But long story short, I think that when you tell players your job is to go in and get loot, there's an expectation that that's the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see players succeed, and so do you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a much better sense of how to create fun and interesting and just real challenges. Whereas, I'm good at role playing, sure, but sometimes those moments where I should probably make a call that will at the time appear harsh or will at the time appear to be antithetical to what the player wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
I probably need to not say no, but to reframe it and kind of throw that energy back to them. The GM jujitsu move of like using their energy, but
Yeah.
right, I don't know. I think there's a place for me to learn how to adjust the narrative beats or whatever you want to call them, and make sure that the challenge is still there, so that when players play at both of our tables, they don't feel like one of us is more permissive or one of us is handing out more treasure. Because certainly that would be the perception after these last 2 sessions, is like, oh, Matt's table is where you go to just have loot. Like, it's like a freaking Mario game. You just kind of
whack the tomb, and the wandering merchant shows out and gives you level 3 scrolls.
It's the broken the broken ticket machine at the arcade, just pumping out tickets.
Wonderful days at Chuck E. Cheese of my youth.
And I have had sessions where players came home with nearly nothing. Like,
right.
It's not like I'm putting my finger on the scale a ton, but I do think that when you have those sessions like yours last night, players, what I don't want to have players do is go home feeling like they wasted their time.
Yeah.
And if we could potentially have a session that looked like yours, but there were narrative stakes.
Right.
And there was a sense that we lost today, but there is a wider...
We've weakened this cult, and now's the time to strike, because we went in and killed all these cultists, and we killed so many of their undead
the next session
minions.
So we can go back and we can make sure that we strike while the iron is hot, right? We don't have that. What we have now is the players were interested in going back and into the darkness and getting their priest.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. That's the only real narrative juice that we have.
Right.
And why do they want to get their priest? Because their priest has, first of all, it is a high enough level that they are worth going back and getting.
They have run with them multiple times.
And magic items.
And they're holding some magic gear.
Right. And that's not bad. That is the system we've created, and but that's the nature of making decisions in any role-playing game, is you can sometimes make decisions that then lead to an outcome that is, in this case, it's great, but it's also lacking some of the things that we want. And I think that now is a good time to kind of check in. Yeah, that's when lots of people are doing their check-ins, Jody, end of the year. So that's kind of where I'm at. I wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Yeah, no, heard and felt. And I think initially I was trying all kinds of different dungeons when we first started out, and you grabbed onto the Barrow Maze pretty quickly, which has been great. And then I went like, man, to just a new dungeon of the week wasn't working for me. And it was also way more work. And then kind of have shifted over to this. And I want to underscore, just because I'm worried you are feeling this way. So, hey, gentle listeners, sorry, you're going to get into therapy time with Matt and Jody.
I think this is interesting, because this is
what we do.
This is what we do anyways.
Real talk of this is what it actually sounds like.
We'll get back to your regularly scheduled Dungeon Master Diaries podcast later on, but this is just me and Jody talking. So,
but you're underscored or undercut by the fact that Barrow Maze is not made for Shadowdark. And it seems to operate under the assumption that it will be one continuous party coming back again and again and again and again, because some of the magic items that are in there are clearly bespoke for the place. Like, there are interactions for how this tablet or this sword or this will affect the other factions in the Barrow Maze. So there's a uniqueness here of form and function not fitting, kind of, that we wouldn't have seen if we weren't doing this shared GMing thing. And this is also another classic. We are living out the classic 1980s debate over, well, how much treasure should you give and what should treasure look like? And a player at somebody's table shows up at another table and they're like,
this is my +3 Vorpal Thord.
Yeah. Where did you get that? Well, Bill gave it to me when he was running last weekend. I didn't know Bill ran a game last weekend. Oh, we played at his grandma's house. And then you go ask Bill, and Bill's like, I don't even know who that guy is. And oh man, he's just a big cheater. So it's this unique situation of having shared characters between us, but there's also that misalignment of Barrow Maze to Shadow Dark as a system that you touched on. But even beyond that, and I'm going to stretch again, kind of go pull the lens back. So I don't want you to feel bad. Like I don't think you should feel in any way bad about the
I don't feel
the
bad at
items
all.
you're giving or this. I think this is more about a learning curve, right?
And that's kind of how I wanted to frame it, was as a learning opportunity. And I didn't mean to make it sound like I was. I am a little bit self-conscious about it, just because it's a place that I can learn, and like I do feel a little bit like I have some additional things to internalize about Shadow Dark as a system. But what I love about what we've done is like you said, we have gotten to learn the system in a way that is kind of this beautiful. It's not like we're breaking a campaign, right? We're not breaking a narrative game, and that I think is a real privilege to not have played and accidentally given your characters an item that just broke your campaign world. And I have used it to inform our Dolmenwood game tremendously. I mean, you folks have very few magic items in that game.
And threw some away. Which is amazing. Like that wasn't the first. There's been multiple magic items that we just let go.
For various reasons. And I think that makes sense in a game with narrative stakes, because there were narrative reasons for that to happen. So anyways, I don't feel particularly self-conscious about it, but I do appreciate the recognition.
So the last beat I'm going to throw into this, and I think we'll cut, we'll hear from our sponsors, and we'll what can you use from this, dear listener, if you followed along with us this far, is when I read through third-party adventures that are being produced for Shadow Dark, and there's a ton of them out there. There are so many. I've been reading a bunch of them lately for my own narrative campaign that I'm running, and been doing this very slow build up to. What I notice is people's lenses as they write their adventures aren't necessarily aligned with mine. That's the safe way to say it.
Yeah.
Much like Barrow Maze is not aligned with mine, or I'd even say ours at this point of the gear and the way it feels Monty Hall. Is it high stakes? Is it scary? Is it this? Yeah, but doesn't really jive with the way you and I run. And I've noticed that about third-party materials. And I think that was the point I ultimately kind of wanted to wrap up there is before we get to our takeaways, but just being like, hey, listeners, as you're reading that stuff, be thinking about that of you going and look at those third party, look at the cool stuff people are making, but consider, what is your power curve like? Do you want to make Avengers, or do you want to make Wyatt Earp? All right, let's hear from a sponsor and wrap this bad boy up.
Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you once again by Tuber Eats, the halfling meal delivery service. Whew, Jody, it has been a long weekend of gaming. And while I am not tired, I have spent a long time shepherding crawlers through the dark, watching them cheat death, and discover, as we just talked about, massive treasure hoards. And I haven't had time to cook. But never fear, because Uber Eats has me covered. Delicious second breakfast, 11Zs, you name it, right to my doorstep. Now, Jody, you just recently got your first Uber Eats delivery. I want you to, I know it's great. I've been using this service for a long time. What did you think, though?
I was blown away. I've never had roast mutton so tender. Not in my whole life. It was so porky. just right with the rye and the cabbages. Oy, it was great.
Uber Eats is the best meal delivery service out there because they don't just deliver the food, they make it fresh to order. Savory meat pies, honey cakes, roasted rooster dumpling soup, and their specialty, Relina's ale stew with ruby red tomatoes. And of course, the special, Jody, which was what?
Roast mutton.
Oh, it's mouth-wateringly good. So get good food delivered now. No minimum order. Did you just smoke a little bit too much pipe leaf today? Well, and you got a hankering for something tasty? Just use the code DMD when you order and you'll get 10% off your first order from Uber Eats. That's Uber Eats, tasty eats, hairy feats.
Alrighty, let's bring this topic to the light. Share a few takeaways from this rambling audit discussion.
Yeah.
Whatever that was. Therapy sesh. Thanks for listening. Matt, help us out. What's something you can take away from this that's valuable?
All right, Jody. So my first one is just, it is super helpful to check in with a fellow player or GM. And doing so can be a little awkward, especially since you're talking about something that's pretty personal, right? You as a GM are offering an experience to your players, and if you get told that experience isn't fun or that changes should or could be made, that can be a little difficult. And Jody, you and I have had some stumbling points, right? Like I've given you some feedback that I feel like now looking back was too harsh, and we've had conversations that have been difficult. But I think ultimately it's made both of us better GMs, and I think checking in and having those conversations about what's your style, how can you improve, and always looking for ways to improve is it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, we have that luxury of having a trusted somebody to talk to about the vulnerability of playing imagination together. I'm going to take a hard curve on this one and delve right back into the dungeon. Dungeon crawling's awesome. If the second half of our conversation has you feel in some way of insecure, do not shy away from dungeon crawling. It's rad. It's always fun. I won't lie. We're about to go into a Dungeon and Matt Stolmanwood game, and I'm super here for it and ready. It's been too long since I felt the mossy crawlings on my skin from being underground for too long. Also, when you're in the dungeon, don't shy away from procedure. It is good. It is good.
All right, Jody. So I'm going to take that and kind of run with it and just say that you should run lots of different styles of game if possible. And Shadowdark can support lots of different styles of game. And if you're used to the procedural dungeon crawl, then try and bring it above ground. Get back to town, do a little bit of role playing, and this is kind of wishy-washy advice. So let me give a little bit more concrete. I just think getting out of your comfort zone ever so slightly, even if and being transparent with your players about it, right? Tell your players, like, I'm getting out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna try something new, and that's just it gives you such a better window into the very various types of styles of play. And I'm sure that on an upcoming show, we'll have maybe some different games to talk about and different styles of play to talk about. So we'll come back to this one, I'm sure.
Oh, cue maniacal laughter and other clues. I cannot wait. Okay, my last, to wrap this bad boy up. Well, it's great to run different styles. Try different games, different styles, different themes. I'm 100% Matt. Couldn't agree with you more. Also, there's a real value in knowing what your, I'm going to call it GM juice is. What is it that gets your blood up? What gets you excited to keep coming back to the table and putting in the work and sharing that world with your friend? That's your North Star. Love it. Just embrace it wholeheartedly and be excited about the thing that excites you. Your players will appreciate it. All right, friends, as the torchlight grows dim, we hope you were able to find something useful in our discussion that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or a unique experience from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, head on over to the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadowdark Discord channel. Look for links to any materials we referenced in this episode in that thread or in the show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can find Jody on the Shadowdark Facebook page under the handle Pezman, and you can message Matt via Discord using the handle SCMatt. Until next time, later, nerds!
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023.